All right. Well, I'm just going to start and welcome us all here. We're excited that you are with us, Emily. This is Emily Alexander. She is, you might recognize that last name, is the wife of Jonathan Alexander, one of our basketball coaches. She's also a professional photographer and mother of many kids. So she has lots of moving subjects and targets to practice on. She's actually done a photo shoot for my family and has a lot of really good stuff. One of the main things that we want to introduce you guys to is how people get into this field and what their educational path was, or even just their professional path. And so we want to start with that. If Emily, if you don't mind walking us through that and how you got involved in photography.
Of course. So I took a sort of roundabout approach to becoming a photographer. Photography was something that I always enjoyed a lot. I mean, as a kid, back when we had our little digital cameras, not digital cameras, film cameras, I would take rolls and rolls of film, all kinds of stuff. My friends, whatever. It was something I always enjoyed. When I got to high school, I took a film photography class. So that was my first real sort of formal training. And a lot of it was learning how to develop the film because, that's obviously a lot more difficult than just putting it on your computer and boom, it pops up. So a lot of it was spent on that, but we also spent a lot of time learning about, lighting and composition and all these other things that you do to take pictures. When I started looking at colleges, I was actually looking at photography was something that I was interested in as a major, but the school that I ended up going to for various reasons didn't have photography as a major. It was a small liberal arts college, and that just wasn't something that they had enough interest in to do. So I was on the yearbook staff. I mean, I still kept taking pictures, and I did what I could, where I could. I got married very young. I was out of college, but barely out of college. And the wedding photographer that my parents found is actually still a friend today. She was just awesome. And so she was kind of the first professional, apart from my teacher in high school, who I had a whole lot of contact with. And she was, thank goodness for me, very, very outgoing and really willing to share her knowledge and her path. And she was kind of the same as I was. She had kind of just grown into it. She hadn't had a lot of formal school training. So she gave me, some really good advice and things to do to get started. And my husband actually gave me a really nice, for me, starter camera. It was a Canon Rebel, and it allowed me to interchange lenses and have control over, a lot more functions than you would have on just a regular little point and shoot camera. So I started learning. I started shooting everything that I could. I went to workshops. I shot weddings with. I shot for free with this photographer who helped me out just to be like, can I come learn? What can I do? Not necessarily to be a major contributor with my pictures, but then before too long, it got to the point where we had other young friends who were getting engaged and getting married, and they would hear that I was doing this or see some of what I had done and say, "Hey, can you come take pictures of us?" And it was kind of worked out great because they didn't want to pay a lot and I didn't want to charge a lot because I wasn't very experienced at that point. But the more I did that, the more I learned, the more reading I did on my own and just trial and error and putting myself through exercises. And as I said, doing these workshops, eventually, through experience and trying to soak up whatever I could, I was able to turn it into a profitable business. And it was fun. So
It's so interesting to hear that you didn't have formal training, like at any point in a, I mean, except for, like you said, it was a film photography class.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
But just by doing it, and maybe the more formal education came later when you're going to workshops and things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great.
And then I could pick what it wasn't a set class. I mean, there is benefit obviously to having set classes and, having someone say, no, we're going to learn this right now. No, we're going to learn this right now. But one of the things that I try to do is see where I felt like my weaknesses were or what I wanted to improve in, and then find things that specifically fit those needs for me and get something that would help me with those specific areas.
Kind of an a la carte education.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
Was there like a real basic lesson or like a kind of one moment or one tool on the camera that really opened your eyes to the possibilities and kind of hooked you? You're like, oh man, this is so cool.
Well, I think one thing that my teacher taught us at some point that I mean, it's so simple, but it's something that I think a lot of people don't really think about, is when you're taking pictures, most people, stand up and you take a picture from where you're standing. You take a picture from where your face is at the moment of where you're standing. And one thing that she really tried to get us to do is, move around, get a different angle, shoot from high, shoot from low, shoot from the side, just go somewhere different than where you are and see what you can get. So that I think opened up new possibilities for me. And because I definitely had many years of standing right there and taking the picture from right there. But and that's still something that I try to do. And that's something that I would try to I would pick a room. I would pick like the bathroom and try to take pictures of different things in that space where I was in a different way. Like the bubbles in the bottom of a clear soap bottle or something like that. Get it in front of the window so that you're catching the light coming through and get real close up. Just seeing things in a different way. So that was really good advice, and has stuck.
It's an interesting challenge to kind of limit yourself to a small, one small space and see how much you can accomplish in that one small.
And I think it helps tap into your creativity and also your attention to detail, which is really important, because you can't, if you're just looking at the big picture, you're going to see a bathroom, which is, I mean, maybe
Right.
yours is pretty, maybe it's not, but.
So this might give us a really nice transition into some of your work. Do you have an image that you can think of that shows how just changing your point of perspective changes the whole image, or maybe even two that of the same people or the same place, that just, if you just change the location that you as the photographer are, it also changes the feel of the image?
Well, I have a couple. There's one, and these aren't, there's a lot of pictures. I've taken a lot of pictures, and sifting through them, I could not find all the ones that I wanted to find, but there are a couple that I have from my garden, of plants in the garden. This is all using natural light on a dark counter and with a window on the right side. And I just shot down. So again, this is one of those things that I was trying to shoot it in a different way, just making sure my background was pretty uniform and making the light, putting my light in relation to my subject in such a way that it created a little more drama. I mean, it's vegetables, but they're not just like.
You're like you said, it's showing vegetables from a direction that you might not necessarily like. You changed your location as the photographer to be above those vegetables, and that it changes the way you take those in.
Yeah.
The shapes,
I think especially because of the lighting in the photo too. It looks like the light's kind of coming from the side, and if you shot the vegetable straight on it, the light would have a very different feel in the photo as well.
Yeah, I mean, it would either look flat or it would be, backlit. I mean, there's just so many different possibilities. So I have a sort of a couple different groups of pictures that show the same subject, like in the same place, but with different lighting.
Yeah, well, if you could find one other one that has like a location, like your again, because one of the things that you pointed out was that your position as a photographer changes it. Even just like an extreme angle,
Oh,
you'd be
okay.
like,
Yeah. Okay. So this is a family photo that I did,
yeah,
a family photo session that I did. These are also people that we knew. So I knew that they were going to be up for this, but I laid down on the ground and asked them to all lean over me. So they'd all leaned over me, and then they started to get up and she stayed there. And I got that picture. And then the next one, I'm taller than the mom. So, I crouched down to get that picture, just trying to get a different angle and create different interests with what was happening. Because whenever I do, I mean, with most things, family portraits, weddings, most things, people want to have a nice, like very traditional, formal looking picture where everybody's smiling and looking at the camera. But a lot of people, especially nowadays, want to have those like silly in between moments. And for me personally, having one of these goofy ones is probably something I would want to have more, framed than just like everybody smiling and looking nice. So,
Closed form. Yeah.
so
so
would you say that some of these changing the angle, especially getting lower, offers a little bit of informality? I mean, would a student who is just barely getting into this, would that be something that you might say like, okay, if you wanted to make it a little bit more playful, a little bit more informal or spur of the moment, maybe try getting lower than the subject matter?
I think yes, it can, but it can also, like, getting lower than someone can also provide a sense of create a sense of importance in your shot. So like a lot of times when you see pictures of like politicians or big sports stars or something like that, the angle will be shot from below just to give them more of a like majestic look. So I think it kind of depends what's happening in
Yeah.
front of you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Even the one with that baby, that's that offers a bit of, there's some weight to it, even though it's just a child. The stare and the being underneath, and him being kind of in the clouds,
Well,
and
that actually, I wasn't even, so the dad is holding
yeah,
this little boy at this point, and we were actually in downtown Dallas, down in Deep Ellum, so there was stuff everywhere. But it was a sunny day, and I had the dad hold him up. The dad is taller than me. I had him hold him up, and then I just made sure there was nothing behind and created a lot of negative space to just, I mean, it completely changes the feel of the picture, and also, your eye is drawn immediately to the little boy, and just to create interest, do something different.
Mhm. All right. Can you talk to us a little bit about a job that you've been hired to do from beginning to end? So, when you first get someone who's interested, we're talking about sort of the process as a professional. How do you, prepare? What does the morning of look like? How long is the day? What is the process of editing afterwards? And then, the delivery. Walk us through a job.
Okay. So when a client first contacts me, particularly for weddings, obviously the first thing is to make sure that I have a date available. Then we talk about pricing, and I have pricing structure with several different packages that I send to them.
Can you briefly explain what one package might include versus another package, just so guys
Yeah.
have maybe an
So a
idea?
real simple distinction. So, I'll have my base package where it provides, 8 hours of coverage the day of. I always go to the rehearsal just because I want to see, especially a lot of weddings that I shoot are indoor in churches. And oftentimes they're in places where I've never shot before. So I want to go for myself personally. I want people to see me so that they know who I am. So I'm not showing up, and because the last thing you want is everybody going like this every time in all the wedding pictures, because they're like, who is this strange person up in my space? So I want to be able to see what my lighting is going to be like, what the church is going to look like. I want to talk to the officiant or the priest, and make sure I know where I can be during the ceremony, because it seems like every place has different rules. Just, all those things. Meet people, get to know what I'm getting into. So my base package would include that, and then 8 hours of shooting on the actual wedding day, and then they would have like a print credit. That would be kind of like the base thing. I have, add-ons if people want to add on the rehearsal dinner. I'll go to that if they want to do. I have a package that includes also a bridal session and an engagement session. So it's at a little bit lower cost than if they bought it a la carte. I have a package that includes an album. It's an investment. Some people want to make that investment and some people don't. So it just, gives people options. And if they choose those higher level packages, then they do get a discount off what it would be otherwise. Yeah.
Nice.
So
So
they pick their package.
they pick the package, and then we meet. We talk a little bit about what they're looking for. And I like to meet with both the bride and the groom, but sometimes it's just the bride, or sometimes it's the bride and her parents, or whoever is actually paying for the for the wedding. And we just kind of talk about, I have a questionnaire that I go over with them that just talks about, all kinds of things. What's important to you guys? What sort of special details you're going to be including? Are there any relationships that I need to be aware of? Sometimes you have divorced parents who don't get along, or if you have like an uncle who's really special to you, who's flying in from Ireland and you haven't seen him in 10 years, like those things that are important to them. I want to know what's important to them, so that on the day of, I'm not constantly pestering them, number one, and number two, I can make sure that I capture those things. Because so much of family portraiture and wedding photography is about the emotion and about capturing these relationships. It's not necessarily just about getting these perfect pictures. It is also about these other things. So we'll have that meeting, and then 6 weeks out, I go over this questionnaire with them. They don't have to fill it out there because there's a lot of stuff that they're not going to know. I send them the questionnaire, and then 2 weeks out, I ask them to return the questionnaire to me completed. And then about a week out, I will call the bride and just go over everything. If there's any questions that I have, that'll be the time that I ask those last minute questions, see if they have any questions for me, if there's anything else that's changed. And then it's the day of. So when I first started off, I didn't have a limit on how long I stayed. And that's really good and really bad. We had a lot fewer kids, so it was a lot easier for me to do that then. And you get to see things that you wouldn't get to see otherwise. There's a lot of downtime, but there's a lot of fun stuff. As I went on, and as my time became more valuable, I did set a limit, and people could add on time if they wanted, but it was 8 hours, and then people would decide what were the most important 8 hours, which is still, it's a
8
long
hours is still a long day.
but there's a lot. So this wedding in particular that I'm going to talk about was actually one that I did all day because it was on location. It was out in California. Jonathan was actually also in the wedding. This was a friend of his that he had played basketball with in college. So that's how they knew me. A lot of my referrals are people that we know, or so I had a lot of time with this wedding, and it was cool. And they had a lot of people flying in from all over, and they had spent quite, it was an investment. Their wedding was quite an investment, and especially for the bride, the details were really important to her. So I wanted to capture, as much as I could, not just what was going on, but also like the California vibe and all the stuff that they had done to make it special. So first picture is just detail where we are, and then I try to do these detail collages. A lot of times the bride and groom like them a lot, and with these details also, like these, they're probably not going to be pictures that anyone's going to frame and hang on their wall, but a lot of times people want these in their album, all these special little things that you would forget about otherwise, but it really helps to create the story. And then shoes, this is another thing. I always try to take a picture of the shoes, because a bride always puts a lot of time into picking out her shoes and then trying to come up with a cool way to photograph them in the space where we are. And luckily they were in a place that had those really cool windows, this old hotel. Dress, I usually say if I'm shooting by myself, which I was this wedding, sometimes I have a second shooter. That's another thing, that a second photographer who works with me. So if I have a second photographer who's working with me, before the wedding starts, I'll send them off to the groom. So you go photograph the groom, I'll photograph the bride. If it's just me, I do spend most of my time with the bride, but I try to make sure that I get the groom in there too.
Smart.
Because he's also part of the wedding. It's that's also one of those things that sort of got more important to me as I've gotten older. And we have lots of sons, and as you get older and things start to become more important to you, you realize how much more important they are to other people. So I try to make sure that the guys are adequately represented. Celebration, the champagne, and then Shane getting ready, getting dressed, Gina getting ready with her and her dad when he first saw her. So that's a big thing. The brides want the reaction when their dad first sees them. And she had not done bridal portraits before. Many brides will, but if a bride does not do bridal portraits, then I try to take her to the side beforehand and do just a real quick little mini shoot with her by herself to make sure that we capture her in the dress and get a nice portrait for her. And so then, Shane waiting, and then they got married in one of those old mission churches. It was really beautiful. And so I love the picture of her when she opened the doors and she's walking in. And even though there's a lot of stuff going on around the picture because of the bright light from the doors and the aisles, I felt like, those lines and the lighting really bring your eye right to her and her dad. So, then ceremony, you gotta, a lot of it is really technical. And it's funny, I shot one of my husband's brother's weddings many years ago. And I remember afterwards people saying, oh, that was such an emotional ceremony. And I was going, what? Because I'm thinking, this is happening next. I need to be over there. This is going to be happening next. I need to be over there. I need to be over here. This is what I need to do. Change lenses. And I always shoot with 2 cameras so I can have at least 2 lenses ready to go at all times. Just trying to make sure that I'm on the ball with what's coming next and what I need to be. So another real tough thing when you're by yourself, if I have a second shooter, I send them straight to the reception venue to get nice pictures of the reception before people come in and start messing it up. The cake and how everything's laid out, the tables and all this other stuff. So I tried to get in there really, really quickly after all this happened into the venue to get detail shots of the reception. You can see a few examples there. And then at some point, and I talk about this with the bride and groom before the wedding ever happens, at some point in the reception, I try to grab the 2 of them by themselves. Number one, it gives them an excuse to go off by themselves because really, what do you remember about your wedding and how much alone time do you have? You don't have any because you're just constantly, you hardly remember it. So they get a little bit of alone time, and I want to get some nice, more, like a really nice portrait for mom and dad that isn't in a church, because more and more now I feel like people, they want to have those, those like standing on the altar by themselves and with their wedding party. But I feel like the portraits that people want to frame or to display are ones like this that are more natural, that are outside, not quite so formal, but still, I guess we'd call it semi-formal. They're both smiling at the camera, but it's not just quite so stuffy, I guess. I think a lot of people like that. So I spend some time with a couple just by themselves, and it's like 10, 15 minutes. I don't take them away a long time, but they also, one of the things that I have them give me is a timeline of the reception so that I can schedule that in there. And we all know when it's going to be happening. And you got to be flexible because sometimes things don't go according to plan, but we have a general idea of when it's going to be happening. And I'm not pulling them out right when the DJ is trying to get them over to the cake to cut the cake. And then, the rest of it is just speeches. One thing that I've really learned also is that, you want to take a picture of where the action is, but sometimes what's happening behind you, the photographer, across from the action is worth getting to. Like this picture of the bride tearing up, listening to her maid of honor give her speech. And then the 2 of them, there's this picture of them dancing alone. The room was packed, but again, just lifting the camera angle up a little bit and framing it so you couldn't see anyone.
Were you kneeling at that point in that one?
Yeah, I was. So you can't really be embarrassed. It was them and the floor and me, in front of everybody, and nobody's looking at me, obviously, but you still, you're pretty exposed. You're out there in the middle of that, and you just got to be okay with it. And then the bride's dad watching him. And then it just gets into the fun stuff, people being crazy in the party and just trying to get fun pictures.
To go back to that one that they're dancing alone is, I've noticed that in some of these, especially like with the kid who was in the dad's arms and you were shooting him, sometimes you choose to leave a whole lot of background, and put them in one part, maybe off center or, not directly in the middle. Is there a way that you use asymmetry or symmetry? Does that create a feeling one way or the other?
I like things to be really super centered, or I think if something isn't going to be centered, then it needs to be very intentionally not centered. So I like to use the rule of thirds. This particularly, I just wanted it. This couple, they were so into each other, and I wanted to give sort of a feeling of them being alone and together. Mm-hmm. They weren't, but that was kind of the the emotion that I was getting off that moment.
Mhm.
And that was what I was trying to get. So
I noticed that some of your photos are in black and white, which I know is kind of a post-production process. Can
yes.
you explain any thought that goes into why maybe you make some photos black and white, or even the photos that aren't black and white? How much after the shooting is done, how much post-production work is going into some of these photos?
Well, so I use Lightroom primarily. And so everything that you see coming out has had something done to it. It's got some sort of color correction. Usually I mean, I have different sort of presets that I'll use, and sometimes I toggle with the presets, but I sort of just kind of quickly do those. Some I'll go back and do more work with, especially the ones that I think are really important. For black and white, there are actually two reasons why I put a photo in black and white. One is because I think it's a really special photo. Um, and I think that having the lack of color will help enhance the feeling of the photo. And sometimes, like, probably, I don't remember what this one. Oh yeah. Okay. So there are two. So those are inside, they had the lights on. And most of the time indoor lighting is just not good. So sometimes if it's a picture that I really want to get, but the lighting is just horrible, I will put it in black and white. A lot of times, a lot of the getting ready photos that you see will be in black and white because you have zero control over, a lot of times you're in hotel rooms or whatever. So there's not always a good light source, but you want like this picture of Lynn where she's breaking down watching Kendrick. And then the other one with Kendrick, she had just given all of her bridesmaids gifts and she had written letters to them. So, she's just, you can see how she's very pleased. And I love that picture, it was so great. Just her just sitting there, she's happy watching all of her girls. The lighting was not good and I was not going to fix it, but so I put it in black and white. So it's kind of a cheat, but I'm okay with it.
And how long is your post-production editing? I mean, like, does that take, now that the wedding's over and you've shot everything, how many photographs do you take
When I'm done, or
for a shoot? And then how many do you have to go through to, get good ones?
for a wedding, I'll have a lot, especially depending on how long I'm there. I mean, over 2,000,
Wow.
it's a lot. So I break it down because one thing that I found with me, and I don't know if this is true with everyone, but I feel like if I look at my photos too long, I start to not be able to see them.
The difference.
Especially when I'm editing, I feel like I just need to take a break and come back. And then I can be like, oh, okay, this looks good. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like you start editing and then you get into it and you just get so caught up in
It's like a tunnel vision. It's like any artwork. When you're painting, David, you take 10 steps back every once in a while to
Yes.
take a look. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I give them a month. I say a month, and I'm not working every day in that month. But that gives me time. I'll sit down and I'll cull the photos, and then the next day I'll come back and I'll do a second culling.
Meaning just getting rid of some.
Yes, deciding which ones that I actually want to keep, because in my contract, what I tell clients is they're going to get what they get is between 400 and 600.
And for something like that one shot, where she's all of her bridesmaids are reading those letters, how many photographs would you shoot just for that one event? How many would have to be culled then to get down to this one shot?
The longer I do this, the more I try to be more selective with what I shoot in the first place. So with her sitting there with the girls, like, I know with the situation, I want to get one or two good shots. I don't want to have 20 shots of this. I just want to be able to capture this moment. So I'm not gonna, especially during the getting ready, sometimes there is downtime and it takes practice because you feel like you should always be shooting something, but it's okay sometimes to not shoot stuff.
Now that you have the experience and you're practiced and you've gone into post-production for dozens, if not more, weddings. And so the amount of work that goes into the culling and post-production. And so you're in a position now where you're probably able to take just a few photos and know that you'll be okay. Whereas,
Right.
Maybe 10 or 15 years ago, you were probably taking twice as many photos, if not more.
Probably. And it also, again, it depends on the situation. Like for something like this, I'm not, during the ceremony, I'm taking photos because, I mean, you don't.
I think what we're leading to, I think for our kids at their age, I think sometimes if we say, all right, we want you to get a really good shot of, let's go back to the fruit, right? They might take one and they'll be like, done, like this is great. Like
Okay.
there's no other way to get in. And so I think this idea that you're shooting 2000, but maybe that's only, 4 different places. And in each of those places, you might try to capture, a first dance, you might have 50 images,
Right.
right? That you then have to find 2 good ones, right? And that I think that idea is something that's important to especially teenage boys, but teenage boys who are just coming into this understanding of what it takes to get one good photograph.
I think 50 is a good number. I mean, that's a lot, but try a whole bunch of different things, and different angles and lighting. And then out of every wedding, you have a lot of good shots and you have a few ones that you're like, this is a great picture. So, it's kind of like that. If you're trying to get one really good picture, you're going to have quite a few that aren't the really good picture.
We're pointing out that you've talked about kind of the entire from start to finish the process of shooting a wedding, and how you have kind of these preliminary meetings with the couple, and then you reach out to them and collect information from them so that you have an idea of what you want to be shooting. You don't just show up on the day. So
No.
at the end of the process, you've spent certainly more than 8 hours. Would you have any of an estimate on maybe the total hours you might put into that you shot 8 hours of?
I mean, a lot. It's a lot. And it depends too on the wedding and, traveling and stuff like that. I'd say 30 to 40 probably.
Wow.
Okay.
With everything, all the stuff at the
Yeah.
beginning, time, that you're working on stuff and preparing things and reading over what they sent. So like these photographers who do this full time, even photographers who this is their only job and this is how they pay. Because, Jonathan and I both work. So he's the primary breadwinner. I'm a supplement to that. But for photographers who do this only, there's wedding seasons. So people are really, really busy from March to beginning of September. But even those ones who do it full time and everything that they have depends on it, even then, usually they will not take more than one a week because you just can't. There's just not time. And you kind of it's a long day. There's a lot that's going on. I mean, mentally, physically, just everything. It would be hard. Usually you probably end up doing it either like probably a Friday and a Saturday, and then with the rehearsals, it would be difficult to do more than one a week.
You've talked a lot about, I think one of the things the theme, the thread that's run through this is you've talked a lot about light. That keeps coming up would you say that that's one of the most important, basic elements of your job?
Yes, I would say light is probably number one and composition is probably number two. Someone told me at some point, and I think it's absolutely right, when you're shooting photographs, you're not shooting things, you're shooting the light. And that's not that you could debate that, but you really are shooting. You can have the same picture. I've got a couple of examples. This is this thing called Diverse Lounge that a friend of ours puts on, and he works with at-risk youth, and they do poetry, and then they have once every 3 months they have this thing called Diverse Lounge. It's an open mic spoken word poetry night, and so there's 2 pictures. It's the same. One of the guys is the same, the guy in the purple shirt. So the first is showing where the spotlights are, straight. I am where the lights are. The lights are straight on. And then the next one is I've moved myself to the side and you can see, so the light is off to my side, but just the difference. And you can see the tension in his muscles and his face. It just really, I think, brings out more raw feeling just by different placement of the light. One is kind of flat, and it's fine picture. But the other one I think is a lot more intense and you feel more what he's feeling a little bit closer.
Nice. All right. So I know our time's kind of winding down, but I'm thinking as these kids are, going to have a takeaway. Joe, we're still thinking that this might be a shoot.
One idea that we had was guys taking photos that might be used as art or decoration to hang in the walls of, in this case,
A
a
restaurant.
restaurant.
Okay.
But I think the goal for the guys is to think about the photos that they're taking in terms of fitting a certain aesthetic and feeling. And so what you're getting at, David, is is there kind of a thought process that you go through as you approach different projects, thinking about how if you were shooting a project for one type of client versus another type of client, what types of considerations do you maybe think about approach different types of projects?
Well, what kind of restaurant is it? Are we looking at a barbecue joint? Are we looking at a high class steakhouse? Are we looking at whatever? That's got to be the first question, because then, I mean, and it doesn't even have to be necessarily food related, but if it's barbecue or if it's like a taco stand or something like that, probably, more bright colors, and you can get away with doing more crazy stuff, like mounted fish on a wall or something like that. I mean, just kitsch kind of stuff. If it's a kind of like fine dining or refined kind of thing, you could still do object. I think I probably never done this before. Probably do more like objects for kind of more lower end stuff, and maybe more like people or nature scenes or something for a nicer plate, just more refined and sophisticated. But yeah, I'd want to know what kind of restaurant it is. I would want to see at least pictures of the restaurant, so I know what the outside and the inside looks like. If we're looking for bright colors or subdued colors, or if I think that I should do a series in black and white, or what the kind of clientele is, just all those different things, and then brainstorm. Like I used to work at a restaurant that had, it was paintings, but in the bar they just had pictures of women's legs, and they were all very nicely dressed, like in these nice, elegant dresses, but you could see their legs crossed or something like that, and they're kind of known for it, and it was a nicer restaurant, so it was like their thing. They had the legs in the bar.
So one thing I hear you saying is that a theme could be really important. Like if
Yes.
all of the images have one thread that ties them together.
Yes, I think that would be important. Like you have it's a variation on it's a series of variation on a subject. It could be broad or narrow, but like maybe you do different kind of like soda cans or something. Something like that for a taco stand. I don't know.
That's great. Yeah. Okay. So can we go on, talking about that informal taco stand versus a very formal steakhouse? Are there a few do's and don'ts that you would say for someone shooting for, images that would go on the wall on a taco stand? And then maybe let's talk about the steakhouse, like how would you coach a pupil of yours that had that job through how they might approach it?
I think that's a tough question, because I'm not really sure that I agree with there being don'ts
Okay.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that I think sets people apart and that makes people really like certain photographers or types of art that they see is when it is different and surprising. Like one of the guys, I went to a workshop one time for lighting, and it was this guy who he does a lot with lighting. So it was a one-day workshop, and he was talking about these different pictures that he had taken, and how the process of getting to where they were. And he had taken, one of the people that he had to photograph one time was an opera singer, and he had to go to her hotel room, and she was a middle-aged woman. She was nice looking, but she wasn't like a young model, and started off with these very normal, regular, nice portraits of her. And, he's talking to her and getting her more comfortable with him. And by the end, the portrait that he ended up getting, that they used, he talked her into getting in the shower. She was fully clothed, but, opera singer in the shower singing. And he's got this great picture of her. I mean, it was just, and that's probably not the first thing that you're going to think of when you think of this elegant, opera singer and a portrait that would go of her. But people loved it because it was different. So
It sounds like maybe some outside box thinking is something
yes,
that
like don't be
that they
trashy,
should.
but
Right.
outside the box
Yeah.
is good. Is good.
Right. Don't just take photos that everyone has already seen before. Think of something new and unique and original.
Yes, for sure.
But I liked how you gave little nuggets about like bright colors might, even though the subject might be taken, in a non-traditional way, maybe bright colors is your way to keep it accessible to a taco stand, for example.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
So,
I would definitely do similar, not necessarily the same, but similar subjects, and then definitely a similar, the same post production. Like if you're gonna do one thing in black and white, do everything in black and white. If you're gonna make something the colors pop a lot, make all the colors pop a lot. That, and a lot of times when you look at artists and photographers, a lot of their style is in their use of color or their lack thereof. That really sets them apart. You can look at their style and recognize the finish on it. I would say that that's important.
all right. Anything else? I think we got
No,
some good stuff.
yeah, I think this was great.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much,
really.
Emily.
You're welcome.
You've been so great. I've loved that we've added photography this last few years, and I'm glad we're able to do this virtually too. It's really nice.
Me too. Well, thank you
Sad,
for having me.
sad we don't get to go down to the Deep Ellum area again,
Oh,
but
Speaking of, do you have any suggestions on if a kid is stuck in his neighborhood or his house? Do you have advice on locations?
yeah. So houses and neighborhoods and stuff like that are tough because one thing that you got to, I guess it depends on what you're photographing and how close you're getting to it. But if you're going to be back enough or your picture's going to be composed in such a way that you're going to have a lot of the background in your picture, you got to be careful because all this stuff behind you will really take away from it. Like sometimes I'll do family pictures and I'll ask the family, do you have any locations in mind? And they'll say, oh, there's this beautiful park down the street from our house. And I'll look at the park and it is a beautiful park, but it's completely surrounded by houses. So there's just going to be houses and all the back, and you don't want that. So a lot of times, the simplest thing is to look for as uniform a background as you can, depending upon what you're shooting. If you're trying to shoot something with a bunch of shrubs and trees or a house, great. But garage doors, fences, you know, a, a side wall of a house that doesn't have where you can just see the brick or the siding or whatever, something that's minimal often ends up being a good thing to use.
A good thing to keep in mind is not just whatever it is that you're shooting, but everything in the photo is part of the photo.
Yes. So attention to detail in that sense in particular is really important because it matters what else is in there.
Yeah.
You've taught us when in doubt, get underneath and use the sky as
Yes. Yes. Use the sky.
Well, this has been gold. Thank you so much.
Thank you.